ISIS now calling for Armageddon, and this is what our president is calling them.
We must call groups like Al-Qaeda, ISIl, Al-Shabaab, Boko Haram, we must call them what they are, murderers.
But some here say, until the president is willing to call them what they really are, we're not going to win this fight. Hi, everybody. I'm Elizabeth McDonald, in for David Asman this week, and welcome to Forbes on Fox. Thanks so much for joining us. Let's go and focus with Steve Forbes, Rich Karlgaard, Sabrina Schaefer, Mike Ozanian, John Tamny, and Bruce Japsen. So, Steve, do we call these Islamic terrorists murderers, or we don't call them terrorism? Because terrorism is murderers with a motive, with a point, and that's, you know, for religious reasons or political reasons.
Well, that's right. If you don't call your enemies by what they are, you're not going to fight them effectively. It's like calling Nazis murderers or Adolf Hitler Al Capone with a German accent. And that's why the world doesn't think we're fully serious about fighting these terrorists, why the Arab governments, the Israelis, are very worried. They don't think we're serious about fighting Iran, which is the center of terrorism, or fighting ISIS. So words matter in this case. We are at war. Let's face up to that fact and do the proper policies, which this president's not willing to do. And that's what got the world worried. We're not fully serious about fighting these people who want to kill us.
Steve, what should we call them?
We should call them Islamic terrorists who are out to not only conquer the Middle East, but to really wreak havoc on the rest of the world. They're very clear. Iran's very clear about wiping Israel off the map. Okay. ISIS is very clear about hitting all of us. They're open about it.
Bruce, the president did say terrorists. The president did use the term terrorists, and he said that terrorists continue to target innocent civilians in that speech. But are you okay with the president continuing to routinely call them murderers and downplay their status?
Yeah, well, I think Obama has a lot of street cred on this issue because, after all, he did put the bullet in the eye of bin Laden. But calling them murderers, to me, seems okay because it seems to more a prosecutorial term and a term that's been on the books for centuries. And terrorism is sort of an evolving term.
Sabrina, Bruce brings up prosecutorial. That's the issue, too. These guys, these Islamic terrorists, they're really not just murderers in the eyes of the law. Terrorists get tougher punishment. They're more prone to, you know, capital punishment or being locked up in maximum security for indefinite periods. What do you think?
Right, and there may be different audiences where you use different words, but the bottom line is that we're not interested in having the president say radical Islamic terrorism just so that we can throw around, you know, hysterical comments. It's because we want to have a better understanding of the threat that we're up against. And if we don't identify the threat and we don't really understand, you know, conceive of it, of what it is, what's motivating it, where it's coming from, how extensive it is, we're not really going to know how to defeat it. So I think it's very important that we call it for what it is.
You know, Rich, there were recruitment documents that were recently found, and these guys are pretty clear about their strategy to spread terrorism. Not calling them terrorists, does this impact our strategy to fight terror?
Boy, you know, I just question that. I agree with everything that Steve says, but on the wording, I'm not so sure. Teddy Roosevelt said, talk softly and carry a big stick. I would much prefer that that's what's happening. I don't know that that's happening. I doubt that that's happening. The world doesn't seem to think that that's happening. But let's just go kill them. You know, let's forget the words and go kill them.
Yeah, I hear what Rich is saying. You know, Mike, here's the thing. Calling them Islamic terrorism brings in the silent majority of Muslims who say, you know what, we do not want our religion besmirched by these radical Islamic terrorists. So wouldn't calling them Islamic terrorists be part of that strategy to get the peaceful, peace-loving Muslims on the side of fighting and stopping these guys?
I think when you weaken our military like the president is doing, when you give Iran or want to give Iran a clear pathway to a nuclear bomb, when you tell the border police not to stop terrorists from coming into the United States, I think that's a much bigger problem than what you call these guys. So this president is weakening this country's capabilities to fight the terrorists. That's really what I'm concerned about, Eman.
So, John, weakening our ability to fight the terrorists, that does impact our strategy to fight terrorism, doesn't it?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I think if people are going around trying to kill people, we should call them murderers and many other insulting words. But I don't see how words make us safer or change the on-the-ground reality. And I think it's kind of counterproductive to say just because you don't use the right words, you're somehow soft on terrorism. If we're going to be at this war per Rich, let's just go out and kill people or kill the people who mean us harm. The words mean nothing to me.
All right, here's the thing, Steve, because in the past when terrorists have not been called terrorism, you've seen officials at the State Department get into these circular debates, you know, blaming it on society, terrorist acts on society, blaming it on the fact that they don't have, say, education. By the way, 2/3 of the 9/11 hijackers and those planning the hijacking of the planes, 2/3 of them had university degrees, or even doctorates or PhDs. So, you know, if you downplay it that it's just murderers, then it gets lost in the weeds of these weird conversations.
Yes, the problem is not that these guys don't have jobs at Walmart or McDonald's. The fact of the matter is they are jihadists, they are extremists, they have a mission, they're willing to do any barbaric act to perpetuate and carry out that mission. And so words do matter in telling the world we recognize what these enemies are and we're willing to do what needs to be done to go after them. So making them sound like they're just street gangs in the Middle East, I think underplays the seriousness of the situation. So it's symptomatic of this president's lackadaisical style in going after these terrorists. The number of bombing missions, for example, that we're carrying out is a fraction of what we did in a few weeks in Kosovo back in the late 1990s. And the world is watching, and they think we're a declining power because we don't seem to be serious about fighting our enemies.
Okay, Bruce, I want to get your reaction to a soundbite that we have. Here's what the president said just last month about our strategy to fight ISIS.
We don't yet have a complete strategy because it requires commitments on the part of the Iraqis as well.
All right, so commitments on the part of the Iraqis. Bruce, what did you make of what the president was saying?
Well, I mean, maybe we don't have commitments for them in regard. I mean, we didn't have commitments from the Pakistanis when they flew the helicopters in and they shot bin Laden in the eye. I mean, so I don't really know if that makes such a big difference.
Sabrina, what did you make of what the president said?
Well, I think it's really concerning. First of all, these are not standalone instances, right? I think one of the reasons that I think words do matter is that this is about a sort of understanding that even though we're not fighting a specific state, a country, so to speak, we are fighting a movement that is global in nature and it is unified by a common, thread of belief systems. And I think when we talk about them as murderers, we're acting as if this is a random killing in Nebraska and another killing in Florida. That's not what's happening here. This is a unified way of thinking, and we have to really get inside their heads if we're going to defeat them.
Mike, go ahead.
That statement that you just aired about the president is such a cop-out, and it doesn't explain why he wouldn't even supply the Kurds with arms who are taking this fight. This is a president that is totally disengaged from what's going on over there, and he is not going to get engaged from now until the time he leaves office.
Rich, what do you think? What do you think?
Well, if he suddenly began calling them Islamic terrorists, would it mean anything? Because after all, President Obama is somebody who uses words as tools and not as serious things. Red line in the sand in Syria, on his health care plan, that it wouldn't cause people to lose their doctors. I mean, he's not a credible person when it comes to his words anyway. I want to see what's really being done.
John, one of the president's former top generals said not calling it Islamic terrorism is, quote, beyond irresponsible. Wouldn't you agree with that?
That just sounds so silly to me. We mock the left when they say, well, actually this should be called a hate crime. Let's have anti-hate crime legislation, as though that's different from murder. People who are murdering are doing a pretty hideous act. What difference does it make? Let's go after those who want to bring us harm.
All right, next up, you think this drone shooting a gun, you think that's scary? Well, another drone just did something that has some Forbes folks, wait for it, calling for more regulations. Yes, I said the R word, regulations. That's up next. Don't go away.